You're listening to The Health of Business, where we talk openly and honestly about what it takes to run a healthcare clinic business in BC and Canada today. I'm Danielle Boyd, and I'm glad you're here. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hey, great. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so pumped. And I'm super pumped because this is the first of likely many. We plan on kind of having you as a recurring guest on the show, which will be super fun because I know you have an absolute wealth of knowledge and insight and background and experience to dive into. So I'm really excited. And I think everyone who will listen to the show is going to gain a ton of knowledge from you. So thank you for your time and thank you for being here. And also just a great excuse for us to gab and chat and, like dive deep in all the things that we both love. So I'm pumped.
Thanks. And a lot of things that we normally talk about anyways when we're hanging out and spending time together. And so it's really great to really dig into these topics in a more structured way.
Exactly. I love it. So for those who have not met you, I would love if you could just introduce yourself and kind of give us an overview of who you are and what you do in the physiotherapy world.
Yeah, so I've been a physio for almost 15 years now, which is hard to believe. I started my career in pediatrics at Kids Physio Group. And then at that time, I met a few teenagers who had scoliosis. And we didn't really learn that much about scoliosis in physio school. And so being the keen new grad that I was, I looked into how it was maybe possible to treat scoliosis. And so I ended up going down to the States and doing this long 9-day course in something called the Schroth method, and which is a specific way to treat scoliosis. And then I came back to Vancouver, and it just kind of worked itself out in the sense of the few teenagers that I was treating, their parents were in contact with other parents, and those families just started talking. And I very quickly my whole caseload shifted from being just a handful of teenagers with scoliosis and, all the other pediatric cases. And it just totally flipped in the other direction where, the majority of my clients started, being scoliosis teenagers. And in that time, I started realizing a lot of them were facing similar challenges in terms of not just their clinical needs. In terms of like this kind of spaces and the equipment that they need, but they were also all struggling with similar psychographic needs, meaning a lot of the parents were anxious and felt overwhelmed. And a lot of the teenagers kind of felt isolated and didn't know other teenagers with scoliosis. And I started to notice these patterns across these families. And so through a kind of a very serendipitous series of events, I ended up deciding, you know what, I'm just going to jump into it and see if I can create a space and a service that at least solves or tries to solve a few of these issues. And so I decided to open. I opened on my own at first, just a solo practice, and I was still connected physically to Kids Physio, and they really supported me in terms of that first startup phase. But we quickly outgrew that, and so essentially over the last 9 years that the clinic has been open, it has been proven to us that there are so many, not only teenagers, but also adults through all ages that have or have had scoliosis majority of their lives, but are looking for a specific place where people have a lot of experience and are going to treat them for the needs that they have that are unique to this condition. And so, yes, over the last 9 years, I have been building this business through much trial and much error, which we'll get deeper into. And so, now our main clinic is in Vancouver. It's at Broadway and Granville area. And that's kind of what we call our headquarters, where all of our staff work there at sometime during the week. And then we have a satellite clinic in North Vancouver in Central Lonsdale area, and also a satellite clinic in Surrey to start servicing the Fraser Valley as well. And those are just, more part-time operations, but at least we have these geographic areas that some of those families can access that. And again, we're using those also as tester sites to determine, where is it that maybe we want to expand in the future. And so over the last, I'd say the latter half of the business being open, I very quickly got to a point where I realized I could not treat clients well and run the business well. I was kind of doing both in a half capacity or half quality of what I would, consider to be an excellent level of, doing my job. And so I made the hard decision to transition away from being a clinician full time, or even carrying a steady caseload, to going into management of the day-to-day. And then more recently, in the last 2 years, I hired a really wonderful manager who has lots of experience in managing healthcare practices. And she is now my director of operations, which now allows me to step out of the day-to-day and really focus on, quote unquote, CEO level tasks. So, and also gives the company a bit of a buffer so that when the unexpected things come, which is a lot, more often than you would think, that I have the capacity to really focus on what those issues may bring, versus I was thinking, if I was carrying a full caseload and these unexpected things happen, that would just be so overwhelming for me. And so my role in the last couple of years has really been more of an advisor to our leadership team, who are incredible, and I'm trying to give them space to really step into their own leadership styles and grow those skills. And I'm working on a few more side projects, and also trying some things outside of ScoliClinic. And so that's kind of brings me to where I am today.
Amazing. Well, and I know you've done some amazing things, and you've put an incredible team in place. So I know we'll dive into all of that at some point too. But yeah, I mean, kudos to you. I think you have done what I think a lot of clinic owners aspire to do, which is, to eventually get to that level where you are in the CEO role. And I think that makes you an incredible person to, speak to a lot of these experiences and, talk about how you have structured things. And I think a lot of people could learn from your experiences. So yeah, thanks. Pumped.
Happy to share. And it certainly wasn't easy. I certainly didn't know all the answers. It wasn't a linear path by any means. I've made a lot of mistakes, and, this is what it's really great to be diving into these different aspects of business, because there are certainly things that I have experienced and decisions that I have made that I would love to share with others about how they worked out or didn't, which is, a really common thing, especially for healthcare practitioners who go into business. Yeah. Because we don't get that formal training, a lot of us are just doing it. We're flying by the seat of our pants. Some people have a stronger knack for business and operations, and some people don't, and that's okay. But I think regardless, it is still really important for us to dive into these aspects of business and what that looks like in a healthcare setting, because there are lots of different considerations in a healthcare setting than, say, if we were in retail or in manufacturing or in agriculture. And so that's what I really am excited to dive into.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting because everyone kind of has their areas that they specialize into. So what we'll do today is we're going to break down the 7 main systems of a business as defined by you and I. But as we know, like, everyone kind of has their areas of specialty. And, as someone who's done the like insurance regulatory compliance piece, that's certainly my area of expertise. And I know you have plenty of other unique areas of expertise. So I think together we're going to be able to do a pretty good job. I'm excited for this. I think we'll do a good job of hopefully breaking this down in a way that is concrete and clear for people. So with that, I ask every single guest at the end of the show what their definition of a healthy clinical business is. I'm not going to ask you that at the end of the show. I'm going to ask you that at the beginning today, because this entire episode, we're going to talk about the 7 main systems of a clinic, what they are, what they look like when they're healthy, and what they're looking like when they might be starting to struggle.
And even before we dive into that, I think it's important to give the audience a bit of context as to how this kind of parallel structure that you and I came up with is, as we were brainstorming this podcast, because both of us are entrepreneurial brains, we have a lot of creative juices flowing. And so, Danny and I were talking about, how are some ways to present this, the health of business. And I think because we are health professionals, we realized that there was so there were so many parallels between a human body and what is required for it to function optimally, and then a business as an entity and its requirements to function optimally. And just as a human body is never, it never reaches health, it's a check mark, it's never finished. It is something that requires consistent attention. Even the healthiest people will go through phases of where they're struggling or they're a little bit unhealthy throughout their whole lives. And so there are all these different systems that come up in a human body where, you know, for example, you might be healthy, but then you feel a little bit anxious all the time, and you know your nervous system's a little bit out of whack. And then you have things that you can do. If you can identify what that thing is, then you can go to counseling, or you can, change your work schedule or change your life pace a little bit, and then bring yourself back to health. And then maybe, later on, there might be something else, like you might injure a muscle, and then you have to rehab that and to bring yourself back to health too. In a business, it's the exact same, where we have to, there are all these different systems. Building a business is never complete. Building a business is never like, oh, done, it's perfect. We can, I have done that thing.
I have achieved health.
I have achieved business health. I have achieved physical health. That doesn't exist. And so the hope with us breaking down a business into different systems is to help clinic owners to understand and have a better sense of like, oh, if these are signs of if you see these things happening, it might be a little signal to you that, hey, this particular system or this aspect of your business maybe needs a little bit of attention and needs a little more TLC. And then with a bit of that attention and with your focused efforts, you can bring your clinic back to health, because you've been able to attend to that. So just want to be so clear that we are not achieving health ever. It's always this fine balance that ebbs and flows. And more so, we're trying to present signs or symptoms that you might need to place your attention in different areas of your business. Another point that I think is important to make is that depending on your actual structure, the how you've chosen to set up your clinic is like your skeletal system. And so in the physio industry right now, there is I would say a pretty, like maybe a 50-50 mix of clinics who have chosen to hire their staff as employees, whether they're on salary or commission or hourly. Most of the time they're on some sort of commission split, or if you choose to hire your staff as contractors. So the things that we talk about here, I'll try and speak to maybe what some of those differences might be, but they are different considerations, because that main structural system is different. The foundation is different from the start. And so there won't always be parallels with that. But
as we dive into these 7 systems, I thought it would be helpful to kind of give an overview of which systems we've equated physically in the body to the business. And now, obviously, these are not going to be a perfect parallel. We've kind of, we've made it work, but I think it's really neat to actually equate this, just as you said, like there are so many parallels between the different systems of a body being healthy and the systems of a business being healthy. So the 7 systems that we have come up with and their pairs are: number 1, we've got your clinical services and products. This is your nervous system. The second system is our operation systems and workflows. This is our musculoskeletal system. We have our leadership, HR, people, culture. This is our endocrine systems or hormonal systems. We have finances and accounting. So our money, that is our cardiovascular system. We have regulation, insurance, compliance, risk management. This is our immune system. Then we've also got our marketing and branding, which is our integumentary system. That's our skin. That word has never been an easy one for anyone, I don't think, but essentially this is our skin. We'll get into why that is. And lastly, we have professional advocacy and scope of practice. This is our respiratory system. So with that, we're going to explain why we've equated them to the systems that we have and kind of explain the bigger picture here. So with that, we're going to introduce the first system. And what we're going to do is just define it. We're going to talk about what signs are that it is excelling, it is healthy, and what some signs are that it's starting to struggle. So with that, we're ready to dive in. System number one is, like we said, our clinical services and products, and we have equated this to the nervous system. So, Andrea, how do you define this, and why did we equate it that way?
So clinical services are what are the actual services that you are offering to the world. And so this could be things like the actual treatments or potentially products. And some clinics may even have other minor services, such as workshops, for example, or digital online products, or that sort of like consulting. Or they may even be offering through like social media and actually have that monetized and be a fairly large part of their income. And so we equated this to the nervous system because as healthcare providers, we're in a knowledge-based industry. So a lot of us went to school for a long time and continue to do a lot of continuing education to make sure that offering is clinically relevant and is we're delivering clinical excellence. And so in terms of it being, we're considering what a healthy nervous system or healthy set of clinical services and products might look like. Potentially having clear clinical pathways and more consistent care plans across providers. And so again, this can be different depending if you are in an employee setting versus a contractor setting. In an employee setting, or for example, in my business where we are a more niche clinic and we focus on a specific clientele. And I know that there are many other clinics out there, such as pelvic health clinics or hand therapy clinics or sports clinics. There may be more consistent or standardization across what those services are and what is actually happening in the treatment room. Some pros of this are that it actually provides more predictability for the public and for the patients who are referred to you, because their experience will be more consistent. And if they have a friend, for example, who refers them and their friend speaks about their experience, if you're able to standardize to some extent what that experience is going to be like, that will be more consistent and predictable for the patient. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In a contractor setting, of course, as clinic owners, we are not able to regulate or standardize or really put any sort of guidelines around that. However, it is really important as a clinic owner that you are aware of what is happening in your treatment room, regardless of what this structure is that you've chosen to hire staff under. And we'll talk about this more, but it certainly relates to compliance and making sure that you who are taking the risk and having someone operate under your umbrella, that you are aware of what is happening. Other things that would relate to having a healthy set of clinical services and products are that outcomes are tracked in some capacity. So again, as either a clinician or an owner, that you are sure that, you have some way to tell that what the people are doing and what the services that they're providing are actually helping the people who are giving you money in exchange for these services. Some other signs of health here are that clinicians are confident, they're staying current, and they can collaborate and share ideas, and that patients they express. So whether that's through Google reviews or you hear it at the front desk, and they're expressing that they've really loved not only their treatment, but they're enjoying the experience that they're having with your whole company.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some signs that it might be starting to struggle, or, the health of it might be suffering?
Yeah, great question. And certainly things that we have experienced are when, for example, clients are asking clinical questions to the front desk team, whether on the phone or if they're, in person, or if clients are unsure how many times they should come back, for example. And this is when, there's a whole conversation about plan of care that can happen here. But, part of that, a healthy presentation of clinical services is that when clinicians are clear and they understand what it's required to get this patient to the goal that they're trying to achieve, and being able to communicate that plan effectively to the patient and to the front desk. Absolutely. So when there are these, confusions about what should happen next, what is the patient supposed to be doing, that is an opportunity for an owner to dive a little deeper into that, to work with the clinicians and the front desk team to say, hey, is there a way that we could better communicate here? Because miscommunications, and this is where it also, aligns with, or the parallel to being with the nervous system. Miscommunications or gaps in communications that cause confusion result in anxiety, overwhelm. The front desk is now not sure how to answer these questions. The therapists potentially their schedules are not as full as they could be because there's a lack of communication. And then we're not really sure whose quote unquote fault it is or where that gap is happening. And it creates literal anxiety and stress at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
When things are also, and so in terms of, if we think about the human nervous system, a lot of us, we all need some sort of stimulation to thrive. And to keep, so for some of us that looks like learning. So we are, some people who enjoy learning, they like to take new courses, or from a personal perspective, you learn a new hobby, or maybe you're a thrill seeker and you like to do, extreme sports or go rock climbing, or, like physios, we very much can relate to that. But a lot of physios I know really love doing, ultra marathons or triathlons, because that really gets their nervous system stimulated and really brings that life and like joy and brings you to that place where you're feeling stimulated. And so, and on the flip side of that, I have certainly felt in the situations where we are not, if I'm not engaging and challenging my brain, I feel stagnant, I feel blah, it affects the rest of my body. And so from a clinical standpoint, one of the questions is your clinic providing services in the same way that maybe it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago? Right. And so, whereas I think it's really important to acknowledge there's like, of course, there are going to be things that stay the same because exercise is exercise. And there are some tried and true tested, assessments and treatments for certain conditions. But think of it beyond just the actual treatment. It's also the whole service. Have you been adapting, or have you been aware of the changes in the economy that are happening, changes in the generations of the, where the baby boomers are a certain, they were at one point part of the working class and now they're all retired. They're going to have different needs. Millennials and Gen Zs are going to have different expectations of a rehab experience than the baby boomers were. Are you aware of those changes, and how may you be adjusting to those and keeping your practice updated? So from a clinical perspective, but also the actual service provision, how is it being delivered to the people? So there's something to think about there.
Totally. And I love that equation too, where it's like, like your nervous system feels blah when it's not being challenged or stimulated, right? And then on the flip side, we can feel frantic, fight, flight, freeze when we're, running at when our baseline is like just constantly putting out fires and, feeling like we're running at a frantic level. We're in fight, flight, freeze, So I think that's even just a really good pulse check, is like, me personally, do I feel regulated? But also, like, does the business just feel regulated? Are we operating from fight, flight, freeze? Or are we operating from like, okay, like, what is it? Parasympathetic, like rest and digest. Are we feeling regulated and calm as a whole?
Yeah. Calm and stimulated appropriately. There's a fine balance in between there. So it's like, is it a calm workplace? And are people excited to learn new skills and integrate those new skills and make sure that that's appropriately communicated to all the members of the team, including the front desk, so that everyone is, excited about these new potentially changes that are happening in the clinic or new skill sets that are coming in. And so I think there can be a balance there of, like you said, calm and predictable with injections of energy and stimulation that keep that life, keep it moving forward.
Just like how we use exercise and education and these things to stimulate our brains and nervous systems. I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay, so system number 2, we have operations, systems, and workflows, and we have equated this to our MSK, our musculoskeletal system. So why did we do that, and what does it mean? What are op systems and workflows?
Yeah, so operations are how you actually go about doing the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. There are many things that happen, not just from a clinical perspective, but from the standpoint of just needing to run a business and have it, the door open at a certain time, and the phones be answered in a certain way, and the booking, the money be collected, and just to stay on top of all those things. For any of those repeat, the repeat things that have to happen, developing systems, workflows, processes that everyone is on board with and everyone tries to follow as much as possible, that is when we are leading to what we would consider like a healthy operational system. We equated this to the musculoskeletal system because this is also the place where you can literally pull levers to, like for example, in our muscles, that's like the leverage of the body. And so in your operations, if something's not going well, you can very quickly look at, like, for example, oh, we're having a lot of patients who call in, but they're not actually booking. Right away, you can dive deep. What's the script? Like, what are people saying, for example, at the front desk? Let's try something different. And that's an immediate lever that you can change. And then you can see, does that improve our booking rates? Mm-hmm. And so this is where you can make subtle or major changes to try and shift how the business is running.
Love it. I love it. So it's like, yeah, it's the bones, the levers, the muscles of the system. I kind of like this one.
Yeah, I'd say this one's probably one of my favorite for sure.
Yeah. And I know operations, systems, workflows, this is like an area of genius for you too. So that's really fun. So when it is healthy, when this system is healthy, what does that look like typically in your experience?
Yeah. So from when I started the ScoliClinic in 2016, I knew that I didn't want to treat patients for my whole career, because as a physio or any service provider, you are technically tied to a space and a time. So you have to be there at Tuesday at 3 p.m. to see a patient in order to generate income. And I just knew from my personality and what I wanted to achieve in my own life that wasn't how I wanted to live until I, retired. And so from, day one, I started to think, what am I doing on a day-to-day basis that is repeatable? And then let me get that out of my head and put it onto paper. And so for the first 3 years, I would say, of opening the ScoliClinic, I tried as much as possible every Wednesday morning to dedicate a couple hours to just write what the trends or these kind of repeatable patterns of behaviors that I was doing or that my team was doing, and how do we get that onto paper, especially when things weren't working well. So if, I, for example, realized like, oh, you're doing an initial assessment for scoliosis different than how I'm doing an initial assessment. It's different how this other therapist is doing. Let's just have a conversation about how can we standardize this so that it's a little smoother for everyone and it's a little bit more predictable for our patients and for the other healthcare professionals that may refer to us. Mm. And so through those conversations, then we were able to agree on what that could look like and where there was room for finesse and flair, and then actually capture it on paper. And so when those repeatable behaviors, especially when they're mission critical, so things like answering the phone or things like how is someone booked and how is someone billed and how is the money collected, when those are documented and when the team is all on board, it's an easy flow that doesn't require a lot of discussion. You don't need to problem solve through it too much because everyone's kind of on board with like, oh, this is how it's supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And so again, it goes back to that parasympathetic aspect that you mentioned about it's a calm work environment. It's productive, but not frantic. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where it's really important because a calm work environment does not by any means, it doesn't mean like our staff are not doing anything. They are always giving so much effort. And I want to acknowledge that, but it's like, how is that being delivered?
It's frictionless.
Frictionless, yes. And of course, this is never perfect. And this is the same thing with operations, is that you'll figure something out and you'll be like, great, this works. And then something will change in the world or in the clinic or the setting. And then you'll have to revisit that that process. And there are so many things that we have revisited these processes time and time again. And we've revised a process like, I don't know, 10 times, and it still probably isn't done. so just again, this is another one of those aspects where, if you do any sort of reading around like building a business, they always talk about like SOPs, like systems and like kind of operating procedures. Yeah. You don't just build it once and then never look at it again.
100%.
You have to kind of know. And so for our company, we did this all through Google Drive and used Google Docs. And then we actually built an intranet that only our staff can access. But it looks like a website that integrates these Google Docs and these spreadsheets. So it's a little bit more easily searchable on this intranet to find like what's the policy for this or what's the process for this. And so that was one of the ways that we were like, okay, this can promote a healthy workflow, and it gives our staff a place to go to look if they're not sure about what these workflows are.
I love that. So it's well documented. It's like they know exactly where to go. It's all in one central repository. It's love it.
And it's not perfect because there's so much in there that sometimes our staff are like, I don't know where to look for this thing, but at least they're just asking the leadership team where to look, not how do I do this thing? And then the leadership team, like if there are no, let's take the flip side of what it might look like when it's struggling. If there are no systems and processes, every time you have a new person come onto the team, they are going to ask you as the owner the same questions that your previous person asked. So how do I do this? And where do I look for this? And like, oh, I don't understand. And so what ends up happening, and I've seen this a lot in other colleagues or other clinic owners, is that the owner's time becomes dedicated to answering these questions time and time again, which can be frustrating for the owner, but then you don't have the time or capacity to do the quote unquote CEO level things. You don't have as much time to think about hard problems or to network externally or to think about like, what is your next move or how to fix, if you have another problem going on, now other people's problems due to a lack of communication or a lack of clarity now become your problem. And then you become stuck in this all day, all week. And that's really quite draining for, I would say, a lot of us, right? Like, and it just feels like frustrating. You're repeating yourself. And so by documenting things, that's a way to quiet that noise and have it be, and then also empower the staff to look for answers when they need it, because there's a place that the answers exist outside of your brain.
Yes, I love that. And that's like, documenting that allows you to like hit escape velocity where you're not stuck in this loop of constantly explaining. It's actually now, here's a resource for you. I'm going to go focus on this, like, more meta thing that I need to focus on, or I'm going to go and like play my guitar because I want to.
I'm going to have more time. Exactly. And more time to do whatever it is that you feel. And that's the, clinic ownership, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in another episode, but clinic ownership comes with, I call it its ultimate freedom and its constant handcuffs, right? So there's, you bear a lot of risk, you invest a lot of money and time and effort and stress into building and having this company, this entity that you are responsible for. And when things happen, you ultimately are on the hook and you have to be available to do that. And the privilege of being a business owner is you also have flexibility. If you're able to standardize and document a lot of these processes, then you have a little bit more time to do whatever it is that you choose to do. And I want to be clear here and say that there's no right or wrong thing to do with your extra time. Some people love treating clinically and they say, great, I can dive deeper into seeing my patients or developing my own proprietary treatment approach, which, a lot of therapists, really notable and respectable therapists have done. Or if you're in that stage of life where you want to have a family, now you have time to do that. Or if you want to travel or pursue your own hobbies, or, I think it's just more about freeing yourself from those things that you can, so that you can grow the business or do anything that you really want to do with your own life.
100%. You nailed it. So system number 3 is our leadership, HR, people, culture domain, and we've equated this to the endocrine system. So let's dive into that one. What is leadership, HR, people, culture, this domain? Why have we named it in accordance with the endocrine system? And let's stroll right into what it looks like when it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the endocrine system, there's a lot of conversation out there in mainstream media. I think it's becoming more common now, for example, about menopause and hormonal changes. Thankfully, this has become, coming to more light in your average public. But if you think about your hormones for all people, it's how you feel. It ultimately affects so many aspects of your body, and it also affects the functions of the other systems. The endocrine system is also like, it's not like when you have a muscle tear and it's like, oh, there's the issue, we need to heal that thing and rehab it. The endocrine system is, as healthcare professionals know, if you can recall back to your physiology classes, it's like this, there's this marker or this hormone, and it triggers the production of another thing, which regulates another thing, and it's like a lot harder to pinpoint if there is an issue. Oftentimes we don't even know that it's the endocrine system, for example, because it presents as something else. Mm-hmm. And if there's an issue, it's not a quick fix. It's not oh, there it is, we're going to fix it. And that's how I would say, in my experience, like leadership, the culture is not necessarily, it's not tangible. You can't hold it, you can't measure it, but you feel it. And even if you can't articulate it, I would hazard a guess that most of us have experienced what it feels like to be in a strong culture, and most of us have experienced what it feels like to be in not so strong of a culture, or even a toxic culture. But it's kind of hard to describe. People will often give examples. They'll say, oh yeah, like, oh, the culture's not good, here's what happened. But it's just an example of what's happened, but it's not necessarily addressing like why that thing has happened or how to fix it. And often the fix is not easy. And it always involves humans, right? And so this is the complicated and the really, really hard part. And so in terms of, what it would look like if the endocrine system or your leadership and kind of the people side of your business was on the healthier aspect, is when leadership is clear on what they're trying to achieve for the business. A lot of clinic owners, I think because, we're a pretty standard service, like we're a physiotherapy service, a lot of clinic owners will think, oh, well, like the strategy for our business is just like fill the clinic, like period. But I think there is a lot more to that. And there are some people who, for example, they want to grow into multiple locations, or some people who want to develop a new service that doesn't exist yet in the world. And so there is strategy that is required for that. And so if a leader is clear on the direction that they want to take the business, that's a good sign, because then they can guide the rest of the team, get everyone aligned and on board to work towards that. Also, if they're transparent, if they are supportive of their staff, and they also hold other people accountable and hold themselves accountable. Mm-hmm. So in terms of transparency, I mean, again, we're just touching high level here, and I'm sure we'll talk about it much more in other episodes, but transparency in terms of like, this does not mean that leadership necessarily has to tell the staff everything going on behind the scenes. They don't have to, necessarily explain everything and every decision. There are some things that staff will be involved in, and there are other unidirectional decisions that leadership has to make to keep things moving. And people may or may not be happy with that, but that's the reality of how, it's clinics are not necessarily a democracy, and not every decision is voted on by all the people, right? And so we just have to keep that in mind. But especially when, I think back to when COVID, like all those changes were happening during COVID, or if you're going through a major change in your business. So even like opening a new location, or if there's a major struggle that's happening that is affecting everyone, I think there is some level of transparency that leadership can convey the current state of the business to the team, just enough so that they are aware of what's going on. It's everyone can sense when, things are not good, but then if the leadership team, for example, is like, it's fine, like we're all we can pick up on that. Mm-hmm. And so when there's a mismatch there, that's when it can lead to shakiness of trust, because we can sense something's off, but what we're being told is not what we're feeling or seeing. And so a healthy system is where there's, I define it as integrity. Like, I say what I do and I do what I say.
Love it. And so, obviously you've talked about that, like, sense that something's off. Are there any other signs that the system might be struggling?
Yeah. And again, this is so difficult because the signs might manifest as something else, like poor revenue streams, or, like the clinic might look like it's financially struggling, but it actually is a culture issue. And so again, we can dive way deeper into this, but some more clear signs are if you have a high turnover, if people are leaving and, with a short period of time and new people join, and as a clinic owner, that's a lot of energy to train and always bring new people into the fold. And so I think this is where, really paying attention to culture can really benefit all those other aspects of your business. Mm-hmm. Other thing is that, like, if conflict is avoided, it feels like everyone's like being a little bit more guarded with their feedback. If they don't feel comfortable to give feedback, if you as an owner never hear any feedback, or on the flip side, if you as an owner hear constant feedback of like complaints of things that are going on, those are some other signs that, like, oh yeah, maybe we need to like pay attention to what's going on here. Or if, people are just like a little bit more disconnected. And again, like you can, it's not binary. It's definitely like it's a spectrum, and you can feel that. And I certainly have felt this with like, oh, it feels like our team's like not as unified as it maybe was, and so that just like, I think for a lot of people, it's more of it's a feeling. It's a feeling. And as leaders, it's important for us to keep a pulse on that feeling somehow. And if you're not there all the time, you need to have someone else who is on the ground who can accurately sense that, and there are people who have this as their strength. They're a little bit more sensitive to those types of dynamics. And those are the people that you want to tap to say like, hey, what's going on? And who do who needs a bit more support, or maybe who isn't the right fit for our team right now. And so you need to have those conversations if you yourself are not the one who has that pulse on what's going on.
100%. Well, something that's a lot easier to keep a pulse on is your cardiovascular system.
But is it easier? It's still tricky, but
you can take a pulse on it. Whether it's like accurate or, healthy or not is a different question. But we have equated the cardiovascular system to money, the finances and accounting. The flow, the blood flow, so let's dive into that one. How did we equate this? Why is this so important?
Yeah, I mean, just like a human body, if you do not have blood pumping through your system, if you do not have money and a steady flow of cash to fund all the things that you need to do, your business will struggle and you will be stressed and all your staff will be stressed. And this is, certainly this is why we put finances and accounting kind of in here. There are different aspects of finances. And I think as physios, we don't learn about these. And so cash flow is one aspect, but we'll talk about this in other episodes where cash flow is like, how much is there money in the bank account? Yes. Okay, great. And more money's coming in and money's going out. It's the flow. But there are other aspects like your actual profit and loss statement, as per how does the government view your financial health? How do banks look at your health if you're looking for loans, for example, and also your balance sheet in terms of what you actually owe and what you own in terms of assets. That's important when you're thinking about potentially selling your business or bringing on a junior partner. And so there are these different aspects. Healthy accounting is when the cash flow is predictable and when you as an owner know the rhythm of money coming in and money going out. So this is, there are many strategies to do this, but certainly, like, again, it's just having that pulse on it. when you're, if from a profit and loss perspective, a healthy clinic is at least breaking even. Of course, there are going to be months that are higher and low. You might be in the negative some months and might be well into the positive, depending on where you are in your phase of business as well. But of course, like in the long term, the goal is to for sure be breaking even, or trying to profit, because otherwise, what's the point of owning a business if you're not profiting? And again, a side note here, profit does not necessarily just mean for the owner to take. Profit just means that you have more cash than what is required on the day-to-day for you to do what you want with it. So that might be pulling it as dividends or as more salary for the owners. It might be giving bonuses to your staff for a job well done over the year. It might mean opening a new location. It might mean reinvesting in the staff in terms of education. So there are lots of different things that you can do with profit, but you cannot, if you're only meeting your day-to-day needs, that's where you're in the struggling range. And I've certainly felt this. And you can't actually do any of those creative or culture building or other extra things if you're just barely making ends meet on a day-to-day.
And I think a lot of clinic owners today, unfortunately, are at that phase. So hopefully throughout the various episodes here, we can address ways to improve that. So
running a business is not cheap and it's difficult. And so I think in terms of thinking about where it's struggling, if you're not sure where your money is going or where it's coming from, or if you're not sure like when you're going to get money and how much, that causes a lot of anxiety to you as an owner. If you're undercharging or you're not able to give staff raises as you would like to because you're just not getting enough cash, if you as the owner can't pay yourself a predictable salary, or if you're not drawing a salary at all, that shows that, okay, we might need to change some of these levers to make sure that you're getting, increasing the revenue. Or if, and I felt this, if year-end taxes are a panic every time because you haven't been keeping on top of it throughout the year. And all of a sudden at the year end, you're just learning about the financial performance of your company over the past year. And that's really hard. And it again creates a lot of distress.
Yes. Oh, I hate that feeling. I feel anxious just thinking about it. Okay. So moving on, this one is like, I know this one.
Yeah, this one's intimately. Yeah. So maybe we'll go back to you. Like, we talk about compliance and regulation and risk management as, equating to the immune system because this is your health. And so from your perspective, why did we equate these? And then how would you say that what are some signs of health in this area?
Yeah, totally. Flip the script on this one because I know this one intimately, for reasons that I'm proud of and reasons that I, struggle with. Or have experienced. So the immune system is compliance, regulatory considerations, risk management. And we've equated it to the immune system because it kind of operates in the background, but it is the thing that is going to protect you from any sort of like external insults. So if you have an audit or if an insurance company changes their terms and conditions, you're prepared for that and you have systems in place that are going to protect you or at least keep you healthy and not, send you backwards when this insult happens. So like the immune system, this is kind of happening in the background. You've done things to keep this operating well in the background and you have this ready and on guard for when something happens. So if I'm exposed to norovirus, I'm not going to lose all of this, these days and times because my immune system is ready to go. I have, systems in place to fight this thing. So in a clinic, your immune system is having, really good documentation, really understanding what it means when you direct bill a company. If you're going to offer any other services, making sure that they're in compliance. So for example, if you're going to use a physio assistant, are you doing that up to college standard? Because now you're adding a service that's like, a little bit more complex when it comes to regulatory compliance and when it comes to insurance company, services and ability to direct bill them for these things. So having a knowledge of these things and putting systems in place to protect yourself from an external source of insult to your body or to your clinic is essential. So this is the immune system. So a healthy immune
and
system.
this is things also like insurances.
Yes.
Like making sure that you are covered in all the different ways. And, you know, we'll speak about this in another episode, I'm sure, but our company has suffered 2 major floods.
Yes.
And, you know, we learned a lot from our first flood. And, you know, when you get insurance, you don't really know what you're looking for. You don't really know what you need. And so, but it is your responsibility at the end of the day to understand all of those clauses. And it's hard for healthcare professionals to really understand that, because I remember, like, I didn't know what questions to ask or what coverages are out there to look for. Right. And so I'm sure there's lots of juicy stuff to talk about here of like, what are all the insurances that we need as clinic owners to have ready?
100%. And we can only prepare for the things that we anticipate,
we know.
right?
Yes.
Like, that's just it. There's an exercise, like when I was taking my project management professional, like there's an exercise that you go through where you like iterate and you like think on all these different things that could possibly happen. But like, who could have ever seen COVID happening, right? Like, that was a complete thing. So you do your best and, you know, you get as many systems in place as you possibly can. And, you know, sometimes things will blindside you, but if you're practicing health in this area, you're constantly staying on top of it. And, you know, so here's some like examples of what that looks like in a healthy system. And the really big thing to point out here too, is like, this is essential when you're starting your clinic. Absolutely, you need to continue to revisit it and update it and do that as you own a clinic and grow your clinic. But you gotta lay a solid foundation for this at the beginning. So, you know, some really good things that you can practice to make your clinic healthy in this regard is having really strong charting and documentation systems. So making sure you're you know, keeping things well articulated and documented in your systems. Some other things are knowing your college guidelines inside and out, knowing where to look if you're going to implement something new, or where to look or who to contact if you have questions. Having that ready and like used regularly is a sign of keeping that healthy.
And this is where we differ from other industries, because we report to a college and we are regulated to protect the public, rightfully so. We can't just add a service and not, you know, like, oh yeah, we're just going to offer this thing, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do telehealth across the country, or telehealth to the United States. There are things that we are limited to, and it is our responsibility to know what those are.
Exactly. And so much of the risk falls on the clinic owner. Even if your staff does something, they don't document something correctly, or, you know, a staff member has something happen, you know, that negatively impacts the relationship with the client. The risk of that, direct billing, these all fall on the clinic owner. And a lot of people don't realize that the clinic owner takes a lot of the risks. So something else that's really important is having really healthy clauses in all of your contracts that not only protect your staff, but protect the clinic and protect the owner as well. You have to have indemnity clauses, things like that. And then, you know, self-auditing yourself, checking in on these things regularly is, you know, kind of that pulse check on whether your immune system is doing really well. So having good documentation around consent, your chart notes, medical indications, you know, billing practices, etc. Jane, I can't, you know, speak highly enough of. They do an incredible job of helping you do and maintain all these documentation processes. But yeah, making sure privacy and like insurance, cyber attacks, all these things, you're addressing them proactively instead of reactively. So yeah, to flip the script on that, you know, a struggling immune system might look like, you know, dreading a random audit. If, you know, one of these insurers is going to show up on your door or call you up one day, if you're living in constant fear of that, you probably need to do a self-audit. You know, having inconsistency in your documentation or privacy processes. So, you know, and we talked about this within systems and operations, but making sure you have, you know, consistent documentation in place is going to be really, really helpful for, you know, having a healthy immune system or to, you know, combat an external insult there. Some other things are like, if you just feel like you don't even know, you're just direct billing blindly, or you're kind of just doing things because other people are doing them. You don't know even where to find the T's and C's of like who you're billing. You know, maybe you're reacting to issues versus proactively addressing them, or if you're not like reviewing your contracts on a yearly basis or reviewing your consent forms, you're not reviewing your direct billing systems and processes, or, looking for updates to terms and conditions within all these systems, these are all signs that perhaps your immune system needs a little bit of bolstering. Your regulatory compliance legal systems need a bit of bolstering. So yeah, those are the areas that like a lot of people kind of just put in the background, because until you have an audit, it's not really necessary. But the thing is, an audit can implode you.
Yes. And it's the same with people's health, right? How many people do we know that kind of live on the verge of health, right? Like they maybe don't have the most healthy lifestyle, like they don't have a good sleep patterns, maybe, drink a little bit more alcohol than we should or whatever. And then when an illness comes, they are just completely knocked off their feet because there is no room for buffer. There is no backup for hard things happening. So it's true. Like I agree with you, what you said, that we cannot predict everything. There is ultimately always going to be reactivity, because as new business owners, like you just don't know what you're supposed to be looking for and dealing with. But at least there are some things that we know we should be doing. So let's get those baseline things in order. So you want to control get as many balls in your court as you can, so that you then can move when these unexpected things happen, versus if you are just kind of squeaking by and it seems it's okay. And then it's not okay. That can bury you.
Exactly. And we know the CRA is auditing clinics right now. We know insurance companies are auditing clinics. We know insurance companies are changing T's and C's left, right, and center. So those are just some like low-hanging fruit that we can address. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this topic, but I think let's move to something a little funner, a little more like, aesthetically pleasing. And so our sixth system that we have addressed is our marketing and branding. And so we have equated this to what we call the Integumentary system, which is our skin. This is like our outward facing system. So I'll let you dive into this one, because
Yeah, this one is more fun and more light, and it is really about, it's our packaging, and it's how we present to the world, whether as like in a physical body or as a business, in terms of a healthy marketing and branding system. It's that if you as an owner know your clinic voice, your values, you know who you are playing to, you're not just using ChatGPT generic to write your website and to write your social media posts. That's another thing that we'll talk about in future episodes of like how to appropriately use and leverage AI to help you, but not just like speak on your behalf.
Totally.
And then if you can, so it's essentially, does what you present to the world match what's actually happening? So do your internal processes match your external presentation? If you are saying to the world that we are clinical excellence, evidence-based, all these sorts of things, and then people come into the clinic and maybe you're still using clinical practices that aren't up to date, or things that are, proven to be out of date. Or you are, for example, charging and clinic fees is a whole other topic, but if you're charging a boutique level price range, but the clinic experience itself is more mid-range, there's a mismatch there. And that's when people, the public, the trust in your brand is shaky. And so you want multiple of the public touch points as well as your internal processes to match. And just like a physical body, we know many people who look beautiful, like take care of their hair and wear makeup and, but internally, maybe they're not super healthy in terms of their diet, again, and sleep and all those other, health practices and exercise. And so I think it's really important, especially in this day and age where we're so much more digital, that those things align. And it can't just be willy-nilly that you're like, oh yeah, I like this logo and I like these colors and I'm just going to like put stuff out there. I think the companies who do it well have really thought through, who are they? What do they stand for? What's the voice that they want to have out there? What's even the imagery and the vibe that people feel when they go to the website? What's the vibe that they feel when they come to the clinic? Do the staff feel that too when they work there, right? Because you don't want to just pander to the public, but then ignore your staff. There has to be an alignment
100%.
across all those aspects. Signs of struggling or the flip of that, where it's like your brand, maybe you don't even have a digital presence at all, or it's inaccurate. And again, like if you websites and digital presences are never finished, quote unquote, you shouldn't just put a website up and like never touch it again for 10 years. Like these are things that consistently need to be reevaluated to see, does it still match who we are as a company? And are we communicating there's one company that I'm working with, and they have the flip situation where they are big on research and development. They have clinically excellent, they're doing like this groundbreaking, they're putting out these groundbreaking products and like really unique services, but their website looks pretty like standard and blah. And so they're not accurately conveying all the amazing things that they're doing internally. And so that's what we're working on with them. How do we show the world what they're actually doing? And so it can present in multiple different ways. Or your brand, you don't have a brand. Like you use stock images, there's no colors. It's kind of like whatever photo you felt like, and it's just kind of all over the place. The fonts are different, the colors. And, it's not all about, this is not just about fonts and colors, but I think it's just about making sure that you've thought through how it presents in all the different aspects.
Absolutely. And, like staying in integrity with that, like taking that brand and being mindful about it. Like, why am I selecting these colors? Why am I selecting this motto? Why am I selecting this logo? And then, like having that relationship and understanding it, and then staying in integrity with it, and, bringing that all the way through all the systems with it. So I really like
and
that.
how do you like, who do you want to, if your business is an entity, do you want your business, like what's the personality that you want it to have? Do you want it to be like a warm, comforting, receiving friend who's there to like listen to you no matter what? Or do you want it to be like the expert professional, kind of a little bit, I don't want to use the word arrogant, but a bit more like really confident and like, that's a presentation, like we are the experts, you're coming to us for expertise? Or do you want it to, like there are all these different, do you want it to be fun and playful and have it be a really like relatable, down to earth? And so there are definitely different feels. And so just giving some thought to that can really change not only how the public perceives you, but what sorts of clinicians and staff you attract to your team. Because that is a huge portion of recruitment. It is your online presence and that ability to attract people who are in line with who you are as a clinic owner and who you are as a business.
100%. I think a lot of people use their marketing to target clients without realizing that marketing really is targeting staff as well.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's move to the last system. So this one is kind of a little bit more unique, but essential nonetheless. So the last system is professional advocacy and awareness of scope of practice. And we've equated this to the respiratory system. So I will let you speak to that a little bit as well, because I think this is something that a lot of clinics potentially, maybe not neglect, but just don't address, right? So let's dive into that one.
Yeah. And so as a business owner, and I felt this and still feel like this, like sometimes the things that you're dealing with in your business are so consuming that it's so difficult to think beyond like what's happening at a Ministry of Health level, or a systems, like a health systems level, or like what's happening in, for example, public practice versus private. And that is so normal. And so I don't want to say, by no means here are you and I saying that, people need to be like rah on the front lines, like participating actively in advocacy. There are people out there who are really passionate about this. And I know you are working closely with PABC, and there are several others that we know who are passionate about this and are lending your skills to try and move the profession forward. And that's really great. If that is someone's area of passion and expertise, there are many ways to get involved in advocacy at various levels. Mm-hmm. There are lots of, PABC has a lot of really great committees. There are, different, there's movement that's happening, and it always could use more support either on the front end or the back end. So there are lots of ways, but for your average clinic owner or clinician, the point we're trying to make here is that you should be aware, at least, of some of these issues that are happening in our profession, because they inevitably affect us in the short or for sure in the long term. One great example of that is MSP and the dollar value that the government is allotting for MSP, it's $23 per visit. It's been the same dollar value since 2001 or 2002.
Yeah, 2001.
And so ultimately, as a business owner, and we've experienced this many times where we have people who say, hey, I need to use MSP towards visits. And we say, okay, great, that covers $23. And then they say, well, I can't afford the difference. And we say, well, I don't know how else to support you. You know, like if we try to connect them with other resources, but if ultimately the government isn't able to change that, it does affect me as a business. So I know PABC and Andrea Burton, they're, you know, she's really pushing to advocate for physiotherapy as a whole, to try and raise what that dollar amount is, which then will improve, you know, it will affect me as a clinic owner down the road.
Exactly.
And so, you know, we equated it to the respiratory system because this is where you can express yourself, where one person speaking or yelling is like, okay, it might cause a little bit of, you know, stir. But if you have 20 or 50 or 1,000 people all breathing life into a topic, that's where you can really get momentum and change. Mm-hmm. And so there are, and this is important as clinic owners, because we ultimately, we want the whole profession to be elevated in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of the government. And so whether you are actively involved directly in advocacy from like the actual, you're working on, you know, campaigns or whatever that looks like, or you are making sure that you are upholding college guidelines, your internal processes are really smooth, your service delivery is great, the public's experience with you as a physiotherapist is strong. That's also advocacy in its own way, because you are living the thing that you want to see. And so there are lots of different aspects that we can go into here, but yes, it's very much about, it's an area that I think myself included, you know, clinic owners tend to neglect or just push to the side. But it as I've, you know, as my career continues to grow in physiotherapy, I'm realizing the importance of just at least being aware of this and then getting involved where it feels appropriate.
Yeah. And I think actually something else that's really healthy is just being a PABC or a CPA member. You know, that's actually like probably the best thing you can do for advocacy, is just to pay your dues, be a member, and represent the profession professionally. Yeah. And, you know,
yeah, it's definitely one of those, you know, it's a feedback loop, because I think some people say, well, if I'm paying these fees, what am I getting out of it? Mm-hmm. So they stop paying the fees. But then on the flip side are those bodies that actually advocate for us on our behalf don't have the funds, because they need that lifeline of cash to do what they need to do. And so it is this, like, you kind of have to, it's a loop, and it's not an immediate, it's not a short term, like, if I give my money, what do I get this year? It's if I give my money over 10, 15 years and I consistently do that, and my peers consistently do that, what is the organization going to be able to do for us all as a whole over time? Yes. So advocacy and professional representation is a long-term game that we all need to be a part of, because they are ultimately speaking on our behalf to those bigger entities that we do not have capacity to, we don't have pull to even get in front of these people. And so that's why I agree with you. That's a great point. It is worth it to be involved in these professional organizations who work on our behalf.
Yes, exactly. And it pays compound interest too over time. Yeah. So yeah, if it's an area of struggle or like you're disengaged from it, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think when one is when there's a change in scope or some sort of like policy, you're just, it catches you off guard. You didn't even know what was happening. You didn't even know this change was coming, and whoa, boom, some decision was delivered from the Ministry of Health, and you're just reacting to that. So it's new to you. Mm-hmm. Some examples of this too are also like our licensing process and how that's changed significantly, like in different ways across provinces and across the country over the last few years. And it's going through another change again for internationally trained graduates. Again, being reactive versus proactive to any sort of shifts or college updates is also a sign of where maybe you're not as aware of the issues as maybe you could be. Mm-hmm. If you feel like, oh, they have it under control, like, you know, PABC has it, I'm not even gonna, you know, touch or like be involved in it, or you feel powerless, like nobody has it under control, I'm just not gonna be, and you kind of resign to that. And I certainly, especially when I have been pressured and I'm dealing with something immediate within the business, it's so easy to just resign myself to like, there's nothing I can do about this. I don't care. But I think either of those feelings, may signal a lack of involvement or awareness of what's going on. Because I think there is probably some middle ground there where you can say, yeah, I'm aware, I'm gently involved to what my capacity can be. And I know that my professional organization is tackling this thing. And I know that they're open to feedback and my involvement. And I know that there's someone I can go to if there is a real issue that's important to me. So that's, I think, where it would be more of like a healthy level of involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you just nailed it there. And I think the other big thing is having an association that's actually doing really great work makes that so much easier to actually want to participate in and be aware of. So, kudos to our current organization. They're doing incredible work. And, I think the last year and a half has really shared some light on that. So, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. And it's all like, I really feel like what we've done is opened up a whole bunch of new episode topics and possibilities. So I'm really looking forward to doing this more regularly. Andrea, this is so much fun. Any kind of last thoughts before we wrap up? I'd ask you what you think a healthy business is, but I think we just defined that really, really well.
Yeah. I think more than anything, even just talking through it, it's just like you said, it's opening all these doors to other areas. And so I would love to hear from the listeners, what are some of the systems that are more pertinent to you right now? What are the things that you want to that you'd love for us to dive in deeper into? Because we can take this in so many different directions. Exactly. And so, would love to hear, if you have a system that you really resonate with or you're really struggling with, then we can talk through that.
Amazing. So if people were to reach out to you, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I'd say come to my LinkedIn page. You can find me, Andrea Mendoza, on LinkedIn, and then we can connect there. As I kind of do have multiple capacities in my career at this current stage, and then of course, if you have someone or patients who have more scoliosis related concerns, my team are the best to deal with that because they are clinically excellent and they have their service delivery and the whole processes, they've got it down pat. And so certainly heading to ScoliClinic.ca if you have any questions about scoliosis treatment in British Columbia.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I can't wait to do this again, and I know we will. So very much gratitude to you, and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.
That's it for this episode of The Health of Business. If you're navigating any of these challenges in your own clinic, know that you're not alone. If you're interested in working together on any of these challenges in your business, head to danielleboyd.ca to learn more about my consulting offerings and to get in touch. Catch you next time on The Health of Business.